right. Is there something saying it's recording? Yes, okay, great. Okay, welcome everyone. My name is Chris Barnes. I am Assistant Professor and Digital Publishing Librarian at Adelphi University Libraries. And it is my pleasure to welcome you to this webinar on online scholarly identity, profiles, and best practices. My goal today is to have you leave this webinar with a really good sense of the overall options at your disposal in terms of the different kinds of platforms, as well as a good sense of confidence going out and selecting profiles to engage with and to build and maintain on your own. So I will share the slides and this video on the online scholarly identity page of the Open Access and Scholarly Communications Guide, and links will be provided later on in the webinar. We're a relatively small group today, and I have a lot of slides. So if at any point you'd like me to repeat something, or you have a quick sort of clarifying question, or you heard a rumor about something, anything like that, please just unmute or raise your hand, and I'd be happy to answer it as I'm going. And then we can take sort of more in-depth discussion questions at the end. Okay? All right, great. So without further ado, here's what we're going to be talking about today. So first, we're just going to look at the basics of online scholarly identity to give us a good, firm understanding of the whys and whys and whats of it. Next, best practices for managing online scholarly identity. What sort of tips would benefit you? How to manage your time? How to make good choices? Things like that. And then an overview of the types and features of the different scholarly identity platforms. I use SI here because that is sort of the industry abbreviation for it. So if you're out there looking for more articles on this, SI is sometimes used in place of scholarly identity. Okay. And after we give that overview, I'm going to look at closer at several of the most popular and widely used platforms, including Google Scholar, ORCiD, Scopus, Semantic Scholar, Humanities Commons, and Adelphi University's own Scholarly Works. Again, if at any point you have a question or like me to clarify something, please just unmute or raise your hand. And as I already mentioned, you should really check out the SI page on the OA guide, and the link is there at the bottom. In addition to much of the information that I'm going to be sharing here, you're also going to find additional resources and links to scholarly articles about this, reports about this, and the like. And so it's really is worth visiting. Okay, so let's get down to the basics. So scholarly identity, first and foremost, is aimed at providing your peers and researchers with authoritative information and links. There's going to be loads of profiles and links out there. They're automatically created. So you want to make sure that there are authoritative places that individuals can go and make sure that they are getting the latest content and it's accurate. You want to distinguish yourself and your work in the world and facilitate collaboration, excuse me. As someone named Chris Barnes, I can tell you that it is really important to go out there and make sure that you are differentiated from the other Chris Barneses of the world. And even if you don't have that common a name, you would be surprised at how often authorship is misattributed or metadata is incorrect. And so it really is important to make sure that is all accurate as well. It's also a great way to improve the visibility and impact of your scholarship. Yes, Tom?
Well, it's interesting. I have a not very unique, but pretty unique last name in Tom. And I have a Google alert anytime my name comes up. And there's a Thomas Vagona in Australia that's a PhD, and he does scholarly work. And his is on growing wheat. So we're not really conflicting. But it is, even kind of a unique name like mine, you'd be shocked at the overlap.
Yeah, no, I agree. Go ahead, Pam.
May I add to your comment, Thomas? There's another Pamela Buckle out there publishing, very prolific publisher. And so I'm forever getting emails saying, is this your article? Is this your article? Is this your article? And I could spend hours every day responding to those prompts, most of the time, no. It could just be so time consuming. So part of my interest is to figure out what is worth spending my precious time on, and what do you just say, oh well, oh well.
Right, right. Well, let me build off both of those comments. So one is a Google Scholar, a Google alert for your name. That is something that people use. They're also on these platforms. You're going to have follow buttons if you want to get notified of when a scholar you're interested in, or if you want your readers to know when you publish something, you can use these profiles to talk about that. And the more that you distinguish yourself from other profiles, the less of those mistaken emails, hopefully, you will receive, because they are automated and they are based on algorithmic computations. And if you can train the algorithm a bit, hopefully you'll reduce the amount of spam you're getting. Great questions. So these profiles can be created or claimed. That's usually the verb that they use. And errors, omissions, and misattributions can be corrected. And it's important to understand that these are automatically generated. So you could log into a database and pull up your own name and find your own works there, and click on claim this account and have much of your work already done, because the database has already figured out who you are, and there might be a few misattributed to you, but these are automatically created from harvesting the internet. Artificial intelligence is now being used to analyze, summarize, and identify elements within the scholarly literature. And this comes into play because a lot of these platforms attempt to use AI and AI tools in order to improve what they're offering researchers. If you're interested in reading more about this, a recent relevant article in Nature by Amanda Haidt is linked here. Artificial intelligence search engines wrangle academic literature. And I'll read the subtitle too, because it really gets at the heart of it. Developers want to free scientists to focus on discovery and innovation by helping them to draw connections from a massive body of literature. We can talk more about that at the end if you'd like, but it's certainly something to keep an eye on and to keep an eye out for as you are exploring these different platforms. Now let's start talking about best practices. First and foremost, you want to make sure that your information, your identity is accurate and it matches how you want to portray yourself, right? Not only in just in terms of like accurate dates and education and things like that, but you are able to suppress certain records, not add certain records to your profile. For example, like if you don't want your dissertation linked, it's still probably findable out there, right? But you're also able to describe your work and to offer keywords and connections. And all of this enables you to really craft and curate the image that you're presenting via this profile. You've heard of Googling yourself, right, to see what's out there. Well, I recommend you Google search yourself, all right? This will be a way of pulling up all of Google's records for your work. And we'll get to a second about Google Scholar profiles. It is increasingly becoming one of the go-to places for finding profiles of scholars, just because it's so sort of all-encompassing. But it is not always accurate, unfortunately. More on that in a minute. It's also important to determine which databases, platforms, and identifiers matter most in your field and related fields. And this is to Pam's earlier point about sort of, you don't want to have like 10 different profiles, even if that is an option for you. You want to pick a few that you can maintain, you can link out to from, say, your faculty profile or your personal website. And then, keep an eye out for others out there, but really have the ones that you are most interested in, because you know that others in your field are more likely to utilize those as well, and therefore find your information there too. There are ways that you can automate updates and connect different profiles. So you can connect your ORCiD profile, for example, to Scopus. So when your Scopus profile gets updated, it automatically pushes a record to your ORCiD profile. So that's a great way of sort of like set it and forget it, if you will. I even have faculty members who legitimately don't recall when they ever set up that connection and didn't even know necessarily they still had a visible ORCiD, but it's completely up to date because those integrations have been made. You also want to make sure there aren't duplicate profiles on these various platforms. This is something we come across a lot on like Scopus, where it's often the result of different affiliations. So you move to a different university, and now the algorithm sees a different institution, same name, but it thinks it might be a different person, right? Well, you need to tell Scopus to merge those two, and they give you the tools, the clickable links to do that and let them know when there is an error or there is a merge that needs to take place. You also want to maintain a separate online personal identity, especially on social media. This is not me advocating that you start using social media, but that if you are using social media, you want to keep them separate. This is sort of a judgment call, I would say, in the sense of like, some scholars feel like there should be no separation between their personal and their scholarly life, and in which case, that's a choice that you can make. But I would recommend, when you are, especially if you're someone who really likes to vent on social media, share a lot on social media, remember that when you post, everyone, if you're using it for professional purposes, everyone that is going to see your complaint about whatever restaurant you ate at last night. So you really want to have a separate X account for your own, X formerly known as Twitter, a separate Twitter account for your own work. That said, Twitter is a great way, depending on your discipline, of networking, just like LinkedIn is as well. Whatever you are establishing one of these profiles, I strongly recommend using your personal email. Depending upon where you are in your career, this makes more or less sense. If you're a tenured faculty and you're not going anywhere, it's not that big of a deal. I've bounced around a few times, and let me tell you how frustrating it is when you're no longer able to access your own scholarly profile because it's an old email account, institutional, that you can no longer access. Okay. Any questions? Any questions about those best practices? Okay. A few more considerations. You want to distinguish between those social media platforms and scholarly identity platforms, all right? There's going to be opportunities for you to link them up. And again, I would resist that unless you are really fully committed to the idea of collapsing the distinction between personal and professional. Many of you might have ResearchGate and academia.edu accounts. Unfortunately, these are really problematic. They're for-profit entities. Anyone can get a .edu domain. It does not indicate that they are a trustworthy organization. Furthermore, their business model sort of relies on infringing on privacy and copyright rights. Much of the content that's shared via these sites is illegal because you're not allowed to post the version of record online. Sometimes publishers will gain access to these and other sites and try to, issue takedown notices and the like. It's really best for you to use the other scholarly identity platforms we've been talking about, as opposed to ResearchGate and academia.edu. And then lastly, think about how you're going to use these profiles. They're not just for your peers and for other researchers and the public. It's also for you. There are certain profiles that are going to benefit you more than others. For example, Scopus allows you to create this awesome pie chart of all your publications and do some citation analysis as well. Well, if you're coming up for a tenure or an annual review, that's going to be gold, right? Similarly with ORCiD, as we'll talk about in a minute, is becoming sort of the gold standard identifier that's asked for by pretty much every journal or funder or other research organization. And so it really does make sense to have one of those in addition to everything else. Any questions about anything I've discussed so far?
So are there ways we could maybe book time with you and figure out how to extract ourselves from ResearchGate and academia.edu, or do we just leave them to go fallow?
I would just leave them to go fallow. I would recommend putting a link in there to a reputable, not disreputable, but you know what I mean, a nonprofit profile that you trust, presumably ORCiD, and then so people who do go to that profile are not left hanging, and they're able to go there, and then just stop updating academia.edu and make sure that ORCiD is the place, and then eventually it will just sort of get disused. These sites operate on sort of the way how many things are linked to them to show up in search results. So the less things that get added, the lower down in the search results these will appear. So the Pam Buckle profile at say Adelphi will appear before the one at academia.edu eventually. Great question. Other questions? Okay. So now let's look at some of the types and features of the different platforms. ORCiD is probably the one that you've heard of. If nothing else, well, you've probably heard of Google Scholar too. But ORCiD is by far the most widely used interdisciplinary personal identifier, or PID, in existence today. It is frequently required nowadays when a corresponding author submits an article to a journal to offer your ORCiD, and if you don't have one, they ask you to create one because it takes less than 2 minutes. This is increasingly going to be the case in the open access future, when things are, frequently going to be posted online without an embargo. And the way that we are still going to be able to access and sort of discover everything in this future is by giving everything an ID, a unique identifier. And so you are going to have a unique identifier if you don't already. Your ORCiD would be that identifier, which stands for Open Researcher and Contributor ID. And it is completely free. If you do nothing else after this presentation, please create yourself an ORCiD and start adding it places. Okay. Google Scholar. Google Scholar is an academic search engine with scholar profiles. ORCiD is just a sort of a display of your work that you can click on and be taken elsewhere, right? So if I publish an article, I can put a record on ORCiD, click on it, and be taken to that article. If I have a lab link on there, I can click on that and be taken to the lab, right? Google Scholar is very similar. It's a search engine, right, with scholar profiles, okay? So it, in its nature of being a search engine, is constantly searching for and trying to distinguish between new and different works of scholarship. Therefore, it sort of operates on these identifiers and makes sense of things by creating profiles. So these are how they are automatically created. And these are where you're often going to find the most sort of mishmash of other works in with your own. Because Google Scholar has the biggest net out there, okay? And it's going to take in everything. But it's not necessarily going to distinguish between the more recent and the more outdated content. And it's not necessarily going to distinguish between this Chris Barnes and that Chris Barnes, even if I put my middle initial in there. The more that you distinguish yourself online, the better Google Scholar will be able to do that. And so by creating a profile, you're helping Google Scholar in a way by saying, yes, these are my works. And when you present me with my works, I'm going to tell you that they are mine because I've already sort of educated the algorithm a bit. Semantic Scholar is an AI-powered version of Google Scholar, if you will. What AI allows is a greater manipulation of the content that you're researching, such that Semantic Scholar is able, if you open a PDF within Semantic Scholar, is able to tell you by highlighting these sections what are findings, what are theses, what are evidence, what are the different aspects of a scientific paper, so that when you're reading that paper, you are able to quickly navigate to those sections, but also so that that information can be extracted from those documents and displayed to you elsewhere, right? So like when you are in Google Scholar and you click on a little tab or link, it's going to display to you the summary that it has created, or Semantic Scholar. It's going to show you the summary of that article or the summary of the abstract that it has created using artificial intelligence, right? Which means that your work is going to get represented to the world in a new way, right? The abstract that you wrote is no longer necessarily going to be the first thing that a scholar reads when they're evaluating your work. It could be this 1 or 2 sentence condensation of your abstract that people are going to be reading. And it's important to know that as you are going about your scholarly life. Elsevier Scopus, this is a subscription database to which we subscribe, giving us lots of additional benefits. Web of Science is another one you may have heard of. Web of Science we do not subscribe to. However, you are able to create a researcher ID on Web of Science without a subscription. In this slide deck, I'm not going to have time today, but in this slide deck, you'll find slides about Web of Science and how to set up a profile, researcher ID there. And you'll also find information about Web of Science's use of researcher ID to give credit for peer review using something called Publons, P-U-B-L-O-N-S. The idea is that we need to start giving credit to peer reviewers. And the way that we do that is by sort of issuing these identifiers. And so Web of Science is working to facilitate that through this new project of theirs. Elsevier Scopus is what we have. It leans heavily towards sciences, okay? So I wouldn't go to Scopus to, I see Louise is on the call. I wouldn't go to Scopus to find the latest Louise Getty's article on Shakespeare, because I know that it leans heavily towards the sciences and social sciences, right? However, I might want to create a profile there because it gives me the tools I need to analyze output and citations. And again, we'll look at this much more closely in a minute. Now we have the last two on this list, and they're kind of similar. Humanities Commons is another platform out there that attempts to be more than just a profile. It attempts to be a repository, sort of an all-encompassing site that you can use to create websites, create a profile, create a group that operates kind of like a listserv where you post something and everyone else in the group gets notified of it. Also a repository, meaning that you give a presentation at a conference, you get to upload your slides to your account and have it linked in your profile. You can even create a website that allows you to talk about, say, your digital humanities project that you want to share with the rest of the community. All right. The other cool thing about Humanities Commons is that it sort of pulls together other commons and groups. So HASTAC claims to be the oldest academic social networking organization in the world. And I hope I get this right, it's Humanities, Arts, Sciences, Technology, Alliance, and Collaboratory. Haystack. And so you're able, if you go there, to really start to be part of this community, this humanities community, right? And so I would go there as opposed to going to Scopus if I'm a humanities scholar. All right. Lastly, we have Scholarly Works, which is completely different from everything else because it's ours. It's Adelphi's institutional repository. It's a place for any work, scholarly, creative, by Adelphi community members to go to be given either full text access, say to a slide deck, a presentation, something like that, or a link to a publication where they could download or view that publication. So you are able to create profiles in this system, researcher profiles, that pull all this information together. So your one profile will have a list of your publications alongside your conference presentations, your blog posts, even your media mentions can get pulled into this and put on your profile. And the super cool thing about Scholarly Works is that it's a next-gen repository. It goes out there and searches for new publications by our faculty members and pulls them in and says, hey, is this you? If it is you, is this your work? Okay, yes, we'll pull it in and add it to your profile. It also is super easy to add something manually because all you need is a DOI or a URL, and it pulls all the information from the web. So no more volume number, issue number, page range, publisher, date, colon, semicolon, which one? No more of that. Which is, as a librarian, I have to say that is a wonderful future to be walking into. Okay, so this is an overview of the most popular ones and the ones we're going to dive into now in the second half of this webinar. Any questions about anything I've said up until this point?
I just like to, just one thing. I was on the tenure committee the last 3 years, and to be blunt, I've never heard of ORCiD or some of the others. I've heard of Google Scholar and some of the others, but if they're so important, I feel maybe people going for tenure should know about this just in case you get external reviewers looking at your work. And if ORCiD is so popular, like a staple of scholarship, maybe they should be aware of it. You want to give every candidate the best advantage you can give them. So maybe they should be aware of this.
Absolutely. And I can tell you that some schools have ORCiD mandates that say every member of the faculty has to have an ORCiD. One step below that would be some sort of like really encouraging policy, for creating an ORCiD. Because to your point, you might not know about it, and it's this whole like massive tool that you can use to really make your, whether it's an annual review or tenure or whatever, make it much more professional and easier on you putting it together, right? Because it puts everything in one place. That's a great point.
Well, yeah, going through it for tenure, there's a lot of moving parts: reviews, scholarship, teaching, and some of the external reviewers. I'm not giving away any FCRTP secrets, but the external reviewers every once in a while throw a curveball and they look under something that other people haven't, and it has caused issues. So you like to everyone to be airtight going in.
Right. And that's why it's always, you always want to, especially pre-tenure, make sure you are aware of everything that's out there. Google search yourself regularly, Scholar search yourself regularly. Great question. Any other questions? Okay. All right, let's dive into the actual nitty-gritty of how to utilize these platforms. So we'll start with Google Scholar. Many of you have already established your Google Scholar's profile, but those of you who haven't, this is the homepage, and you'll see at the top left there, the My Profile icon. When you click on that, you will be taken to your profile, and this is what a profile looks like. So you're going to see up here, right, is the verified email at adelphi.edu. I always look for that because it tells me that it is being actively maintained, right, by this individual. I'm also able to add keywords and phrases in here, and there is a follow button. So you can follow yourself if you want, so you can see what Google Scholar is sending out others about yourself. And then over here we see the way of adding additional works. All right. So if I click on any of these, I'm going to be able to edit my profile, my picture, but I want to show you how to actually get to adding articles. If I click add articles, it searches for my name and it pulls up a list and just tells me, well, why don't you pick the ones that you've written? Okay. Well, shocker, I haven't written anything about SARS or COVID or the evolution of antibody immunity. So none of these are mine. All right, which is not surprising. You'll notice here that there are 10 pages of results. So some of them could be mine, right? This is what you'll have to go through. Gives you a good sense for who are the other people with your name out there, what are they doing, right? Okay. You can also add an article manually if you want. And here are those dreaded fields that we all remember having to enter all the information in manually. Um, and so, sorry. And so you have lots of different ways of updating your profile. But again, Google Scholar will attempt to always find new works by you and present them to you. So you don't have to do this. Something that many of you might be interested, especially in the sciences, those of you who are aware that the OSTP memo, the White House now makes it, is going to be soon making a requirement that all federally funded research is available public access. The difference between public access and open access is public access means free to read. Open access means you can not only read it, but you can do things with it. You could republish it. You can add it to a collection. You can do things with it. So I've included a link to the FAQ about this public access section. Key thing to know is it's rarely accurate, at least currently. If you click on it, you are taken to this page. This is Kate Krasinski's Google Scholar profile. And so you can see that you can filter by the funding agency, National Science Foundation, or this is a agency in Poland, I believe. And then you also given links to the PDF versions and where they are. You'll note that it even pulls from academia.edu, right? It also tells you what we don't have full text access to. Butchering marks on bones of African savanna elephants, right? So if you are this scholar, it would be important for you to make sure that this was accurate. And they give you directions on how to tell them how to fix this, all right? But it's one more feature of Google Scholar. It's also automatically created. So if you get a federal funding grant and your grant number gets ingested by Google Scholar, it's gonna appear here. Any questions about Google Scholar? We're going to move on. Yes, go ahead, Pam.
Question. I won't name names, but I am aware of some faculty members who find ways to compete with other faculty members of ways to bump their Google Scholar rankings. Should I know about this? Should I participate in this? What's that about? I feel like I should be more informed than I am.
I think Google Scholar rankings are pretty low on the totem pole of rankings because they are based upon the same sort of ways that Google bases rankings itself, which is on links and clicks. So it's like things are going to be ranked higher if more things are linked to them. How many things cite a certain thing, but you don't know what is citing your work, right? And so if you are going to be evaluating citations as a means of evaluating impact, it matters where you are cited, right? And Google Scholar is not going to give you that information. Scopus will, and others will, but I don't think Google Scholar will. Great question. Okay, here's ORCiD. All right. Again, many of you might be familiar with this. It's super easy. Register, use it, share it. Okay. When you actually create your profile, this is what it will look like. These are the categories that you have here. There are others that you can add. We'll talk about that in a second. So membership and service, right? So this is a great way of not just sharing information about your works, right? But about maybe who you're an editor for, where you do your peer review, or where you work, and to keep these things updated, okay? Here are what individual works look like, all right? If it has a DOI, it will be included there. DOIs are super, super important. Just like the personal identifiers, which is an ORCiD, a digital object identifier is equally important for being able to always resolve to the version of record, right? The cool thing about DOI is it's a stable link that's registered somewhere. And so it's always going to resolve. It's always going to get back there or tell you what went wrong. And so if we click on, if we want to add more works to our list, we have several options. We can search, we can use that DOI. Again, the DOI is not just a link, it's a sort of registered link. And when you register it, you give it this information. You're like, okay, this DOI, the DOI knows what the page range is. It knows the volume, the issue, right? So just by entering the DOI, it can pull all of that information. There's also PubMed ID, okay? BibTeX and manual, right? BibTeX is a file format for sharing bibliographic information. You can also hide certain things. We were talking earlier about what you want to make public, what you might want to hide, right? So I have my biography in here. This was up when I was applying for jobs. It's down when I'm not applying for jobs, right? This is another good way of, sharing information about your career path, but it's not always, worth your time, in which case you don't want to have it just sort of blank so you would be able to hide it. And that's what that red dot there is signifying, that it is hidden from public view. You can also see that my email address is hidden from public view and my Gmail account is hidden from public view, but it has them, right? What is not hidden from public view are links out to other authoritative websites with my content. So I used to work at Franklin and Marshall. Here's a link to the stuff of mine that's in their IR, their Institute Repository. Same with Gettysburg, same with Michigan, right? Here are those keywords that these are the same keywords that I added to my Google Scholar profile, right? And this is going to help people understand what I do. And these are all things that can be customized very easily. Two things that weren't on my profile is first of all, the peer review, right? So you can add your reviewer responsibilities to your ORCiD profile. You could also add other IDs. Here it's the Scopus author ID of Kate Fiore to your profile. This is what we talked about earlier, connecting your different profiles so that people are able to sort of seamlessly go between all of your different works and profiles, right? So like if they're at ORCiD and they want to get to the authoritative version of record of your article, they should be able to click on that and get taken directly there. A DOI will do that. Let's look a bit more at the peer review part. So here we have Kate's review activity. So you could see that she's reviewing for the journal Psychology and Aging, the review date, and even the convening organization. All right. So lots of good information here. The key thing about Kate's profile is this, connected via Scopus. All right. This is an example of when you're able to go in there and just set it and forget it. Because Kate connected her Scopus profile to her ORCiD profile, Scopus is updating her ORCiD profile, okay? So rather than having to go in there and enter it manually or even drop a DOI in and then save it and add it, this is automatically created, okay? Here is Kate's Scopus profile. You can see the ORCiD number listed there, and that's also a link, right? So that it's seamless. You can go from your ORCiD to your Scopus and from your Scopus to your ORCiD, right? They're going to be providing different information. So here we are at the Scopus profile. Remember, this is a Elsevier subscription database that we have access to because we spend quite a bit of money on it, right? It's also got a lot of cool features, all right, that you should be aware of and take advantage of. So if you want to connect your ORCiD, all you do is you first have to have a Scopus profile, but then you simply click the Connect to ORCiD. And this is a little blurb about the Scopus identifier. It creates a unique number, right, to apply to all the documents that it believes are yours, right? So you're given this number. In this case, for Bob Bornstein, it's 710-294-7370. Okay. That's going to get applied to everywhere, and it's going to be added to his profile that looks like this. If we look at Kate's profile, we see her affiliation. We see how many citations she has, co-authors, and her H index, which is here, right? That's the impact. We also see down here a lot of other options where we can look at additional information. The thing I want to point out now is the preprints part. During the pandemic, a lot of attention was devoted to the use of preprints. some of it bad because people don't understand that they were not peer reviewed. But now ORCiD wants to give you the option of linking to those preprints, okay? And so we'll talk more about that in a second, I guess. I thought that's where my slide was going. But you can also add your awarded grants there too. All right. The options within Scopus are also linking you out to authoritative places. So view at publisher, the version of record, right? Connect to the article on OneSearch, okay? And then here are the citation listings. Lots of great information here. Here's what you might want to be interested in and use if you're coming up for review. Analyze author output and citation overview. So if I click on Analyze Author Output, I'm given this really awesome breakdown of all of the different places Kate Fiore has published, the type, the year, the subject, right? It's really great. I'm also, if I click the citation link, given this, which not only tells me how many citations, but when, and this is also clickable, right? So there's loads of information inside of Scopus, and it's there for the taking if you have your profile set up. The only way this works, though, is if you set up your profile and you do a little curation so that you know it's actually accurate. Once it is, then you can utilize these various tools. Here's the preprints part. So if Kate were to add a preprint, it would exist here and under preprints, and this tells you that all of these preprint servers, many of which you might be familiar with, like arXiv, bioRxiv, chemarXiv, medRxiv, will be linkable here, right? So again, it's about creating a authoritative network of links that take your reader to the places that they want to go, that you want them to go. Here is the homepage of arXiv. We don't have time to talk about arXiv today, but it is another place where you can go to post preprints that offers you the ability to create an ID and a unique identifier so that all of your stuff can be brought together in one place. Any questions about any of the platforms we've looked at so far for Scopus? Okay.
Scopus is owned by Elsevier, so does it only track a publishing you've done in Elsevier journals?
No, it's across the board. Across the board, yeah. Great question. This is a bit about the author identifiers at arXiv. Again, I just want to point out that you can link your ORCiD identifier to this so that it gets updated. Here's Semantic Scholar. This is the AI. This is the one that uses AI. All right. I'm not going to spend too much time on this. I'll just point out that it kind of looks like Google Scholar in that it's going to find all your results and give you some different options. You can claim your author page just like you would in Google Scholar. The things that are interesting here are the AI stuff. So here is those of you might know, TLDR means too long didn't read. That's when you send a really long email that no one's going to read. You just put the point of it up top. So they thought up the idea of using this AI to create TLDRs, or one-sentence summaries of scholarly literature based upon the abstract, okay? So here is a one-sentence summary of this article. And if I click on it, here's the one-sentence summary, and here's the actual abstract. And so the AI is taking this and making this, and this is new, so they want to know, how is this working? Did you like it? Did it not do a good job? Did it do a great job? So these are actively being beta tested. Another new sort of category that AI is allowing for are highly influential citations. So where are you cited in places that are the most influential? All right. These are new kinds of metrics that we weren't able to really have before because we didn't have the technology, the AI, to really make it possible. All right. So it's something to keep an eye on. It's not really discipline specific. And so you could create a profile there. I would think of it as like Google Scholar with AI. Now we're going to be talking about Humanities Commons. We already talked a bit about it. it tries to be everything. It tries to be a repository. It tries to be a WordPress website. It tries to be a profiling platform. And it does these really well. Mainly, I feel, because it's got a lot of community involvement. It's got a lot of people involved. And so you know that when you go there and you post things there, it's going to get looked at. Here's an example. Anna, I apologize for using you as an example. I've done this before. It's a great profile, though. You can see here that, just as in the other profiling sites, that Anna links out to her ORCiD, to her social media, to her Adelphi faculty profile. She's also got her academic interests and the commons groups that she's a member of. She's following 9 other members. There's lots of ways to engage with the community using Humanities Commons. Last but not least, Adelphi University Scholarly Works. This is our institutional repository, and this is where all of the work that is produced at Adelphi, ideally, is going to be found. Not necessarily full text, right, but either linked to or full text. We are actively developing this, okay? And so what I really want to talk to you about is the profiling system. So here's an example of a researcher profile. We're picking on Kate again. You can see here that her ORCiD ID is linked from her profile. We have her rank and title and everything, links out to other authoritative pages, a blurb about her expertise as completely editable. We have, organizational affiliations, and there's quite more education, lots of the things that you would find on a typical faculty profile. And then the output tab lets you see all of the works, okay? And these include journal articles, but also anything you've uploaded to the repository. So like a conference presentation, for example, you'd be able to have a conference presentation in here. It would get a digital object identifier, and then you could add it to ORCiD, or this will allow us to push things to your ORCiD when it's completely integrated, meaning that you upload a conference presentation here, and then because you've given us permission, we're able to hit a button and that citation gets pushed to your ORCiD and is now findable on your ORCiD, okay? You'll see also these cool things are called alt metrics. These could be like how many times this article was featured in a newspaper, how many times it was featured on a blog, how many media mentions did it get, how many times was it linked to? That's what alt metrics measure, as opposed to the standard citations you would look at that we've been looking at earlier, like academic citations. Okay, so Scholarly Works is first and foremost a searchable repository that can be added to by any member of the faculty, student body, or professional staff. And there's loads of kinds of works. I won't read them all here. And things that we can't host natively within Scholarly Works, we place elsewhere, and we place like in YouTube, for example. If it's an enormous video file, we're able to stream it from YouTube and host it within Scholarly Works. It's a discovery platform because you're able to upload open access of paywalled content. Like, for example, you can upload the author's accepted manuscript of a paywalled article so that someone who didn't have access to that journal, didn't have a subscription, was still able to access the content because you uploaded the author's accepted manuscript, the post-peer review version, to Scholarly Works. You can also, as I've said multiple times now, add conference presentations. This gets crawled by Google Scholar. So when you add something here, eventually it will show up on your Google Scholar profile. And we can also give you lots of usage stats, how many times your stuff has been downloaded, where it's been downloaded. We even have this really cool map that shows you where things are very frequently downloaded. And in addition to that, it's also a sharing platform, not just discovery, but sharing out. If you add something, we give it a DOI, a digital object identifier, meaning that it will always have a permanent link. You can export citations. You can even export different file types, not too exciting, but exciting for us in the library. Here are the really cool features. it uses a smart deposit form. So as I mentioned earlier, you just enter the DOI and it populates all the rest, or a PMID or a URL. It's able to pull that from the information. If you have a lot of work, right, and it's not available online, we're able to batch ingest it. Okay, but what we've been finding is that most of the works that are out there in like the last 15, 20 years are available online, and we're able to get that metadata and ingest it, right? Not the full text, but the metadata. And what we're working on is that smart harvesting of more and more content in there and the ability to push content and information to ORCiD. The profile allows all of these to come together in one place, right? So you can see all of the information about yourself as well as all of your works. And that is the end of my presentation. So I was going a little fast there, but I saw we were running out of time. I just really wanted to at least give a few minutes at the end for some discussion. Please, if you would like additional information, please don't hesitate to email me. But you should also check out, as I mentioned at the beginning, the online scholarly identity page of the Open Access Guide. And we also have a Scholarly Works FAQ if you're interested in learning more about Scholarly Works. And with that, I will stop recording